Hello everyone, welcome to the Reading Boys Mock C review. This is the paper one, so the English paper review, and this is what we're going through today. So obviously there'll be another paper where we go through the paper two, which is the maths, but this one only covers the English, but we'll run through each of the sections and I'll sort of give you the correct answers and hopefully some tips and tricks along the way. So I have included here the following instructions, so it's always worth just looking through these as part of revision to make sure you're familiar with how these work. One thing I thought is a good idea to note is because unlike other papers where you would rub out the answers, because the answers are done in pen in this exam, in order to change answer, you would cross out an answer and rewrite the new one. But we do occasionally have the scenario where you maybe think it's C, then change it A and want to change back. In that case, there is an option. What you can do is you can cross out A and then reselect C. And in doing that, you will swap your answer back to the answer you had before. So a nice little tip I thought I would just include, and it's worth having. So again, do familiarise yourself with this, again, in terms of both how long the sections are, and also just the rules, because these do mimic the rules that we'd expect to see in the real exam. Right, let's jump into it. So the following, or the first section of the test is comprehension. So there are some practice questions here. And if we look, the practice questions give you a chance to do a couple of things. One is to obviously try out the questions, make sure you're happy with how you would mark the answer down. But also you can do things like, for example, calculate approximately how long you have to do the questions. If you know it was 20 minutes for comprehension and there's a large text, you may decide I'm going to spend 6 minutes reading the test and 14 minutes answering the questions, for example. And that can be obviously really useful as well as completing the answers in a manner that is correct. So here's a practice question, obviously short passage of text, and how far was the bank? I think in this case the near bank was a yard away. So just here, look, near bank was a yard away. And in this case, he immediately began to swim. What type of word is immediately? In this case, it's an adverb because it's an adjective of a verb. It describes the word swimming in this case. How did he begin to swim? He did so immediately. Hopefully that's clear. So these are the practice questions. I think now we should jump into it. So obviously you will have in front of you, hopefully, your copy of the exam. If you want to read through again, if for any reason you can't read yours, perhaps because you've highlighted or underlined certain things, here's another copy. By all means, pause it here. Just remember that as you're reading through, we tend to advise you underline things that are likely to be answer to questions, and generally that constitutes things like the 5 W's, the who, what, when, where, why, or any other particularly good use of descriptive language. I think that's really useful as a thing to do as you're reading through. Let's now go through some of the questions. So, number one, how many years had the narrator been studying Sherlock Holmes? And he had been studying him for 8 years. I think that was in the opening line here. During the last 8 years, he had studied his friend's methods. What type of case was the narrator not able to refer to? Ordinary cases. We know that since Sherlock Holmes gets to select his own cases, he only picks those that interest him, and those means he doesn't do any cases that are ordinary. Number three, what was his approach to taking on cases? He only took on the most extraordinary. And again, this is because he's not in it for money, he's in it purely for his own amusement and enjoyment. And so he only takes on those that tickle his fancy, that interest him. Number four, why was the narrator able to talk about the case now? Well, he made a promise that he wouldn't talk, but the lady whom he promised to had passed away. So in this case, the answer is A. The lady whom he had pledged had died, so he was free then from his promise. Number five, why was the narrator glad that the facts were now out in the open? And it's because it could dispel the rumours. It mentions in the text that the rumours could be more harmful than the actual truth, and so now he can finally clear up the truth. Number six, why was the narrator surprised at the clock? And that's because it was far too early for Holmes to normally be up. It says in the text that he was a late riser, and so a late riser means he doesn't get up until far later in the day. In this case, something obviously unusual is the case. Number seven, what was the common lot? In this case, the fact that everyone seemed to be getting woken up early. So obviously the young lady had gotten up early herself. She'd woken up Mrs. Hudson, who's the caretaker, and she had obviously then woken up Sherlock Holmes, and then Sherlock Holmes, because he knew Watson would want to listen in, woke him up. So the fact that everyone was getting up is the common lot, as in the situation that everyone finds themselves in this case. Number eight, why had the young lady turned up? And it's because she urgently wanted to tell Sherlock Holmes something. Obviously, she'd got up and, first things first. Which word best describes Watson's view of Holmes's skill? Awe. In this case, if you are in awe of something, you are amazed, you're incredibly impressed. Whereas apathy, lethargy, or suspicion, these are all negative connotations. Either, laziness or, you suspect there's something foul afoot. In this case, no, Watson is incredibly impressed by Holmes and his amazing detective skills. Number 10, what does heavily veiled refer to? In this case, heavily veiled. A veil is kind of, like bridesmaids wear veils, something that covers your face. In this case, the lady's dress was heavily veiled, hidden away. She obviously didn't want to be spotted, so she's trying to be surreptitious, and so she's dressing in a way that makes her hard to see. So it's her attire, which is her outfit, her clothing. Number 11, why was Holmes pleased to see Mrs. Hudson? It's because she had lit the fire. Obviously, it's cold first thing in the morning. Holmes has assumed that the girl is shivering because it's cold, so he's very pleased that Mrs. Hudson is trying to fix that. However, actually, this leads us quite nicely on to the next question, number 12. For all his intuition, what does Holmes get wrong? Well, he assumes that the lady was shivering because she was cold, but she is in fact shivering because she's terrified, because she's afraid. So if you're looking at the text here, it's not the cold that makes her shiver, it's terror. She's obviously afraid of something. Moving on then, number 13. Which word best describes lady visitor? Haunted. You know, the haunted in this case, like haunted house, a scary house. She's obviously deathly afraid of something. Number 14, occurred in the early days. In this context, what type of word is early? In this case, it's an adjective. It's a description of the days. It's a description of their time together. The early days are the first days they spent working together. Number 15, a little resentment. Which word is most similar to resentment? In this case, bitterness. So if you resent something or you're bitter, you have ill feelings, bad feelings, potentially dislike, or you remember it. Well, the opposite of fondly. You know, you remember it with slightly more than sadness. I would say, you know, you remember it with a strong dislike. Number 16, with premature grey, what type of word is most similar to premature? In this case, early. So she's only 30 years old and she already has grey hair, and that's perhaps because of stress or fear or some other goings on that we'll have to read the remainder of the story to find out what caused it. Again, so that was now obviously 16, the end of the section. I must say all the Sherlock Holmes books are fantastic. They're well worth reading, as they're fantastic bits of literature. Moving on now to English, we have similar in meaning. In other places, we might call this synonyms, as well as antonyms being opposite in meaning, but in this case, similar in meaning. In this case, you have to read the word in the box and find the one that means the same. So in this case, to frighten and to scare are the practice question, both meaning to, as we say, frighten someone, like again, like that haunted house. So number 17, harmony and agreement. If you are in harmony with someone, a bit like how a musical band might be in harmony, they're all playing the same note. Well, if you're in harmony with someone in terms of your opinion, it means you've both made the same decision. So a harmonious decision about where to eat food would mean you end up both wanting to go to the same restaurant, for example. Number 18, hideous and unedifying. Both mean awful or incredibly bad looking. So an unedifying visage would be one that is, you know, terrible to look at, awful to look at. If you impair something or you damage it, so again, I've most often seen something having impaired function, that means it doesn't work as well as it should because it's damaged. So impaired ability would mean your ability isn't as it should, so perhaps because you've hurt your eyes or lost your glasses or damaged your eyes in some way. Too much TV, perhaps. None to 20, to imitate and to emulate both mean to copy. So if you imitate and emulate those that you respect, so obviously, you know, if you've got a fantastic footballer, perhaps you want to try and imitate him or emulate them on the football pitch. 21, to designate or to nominate both mean to select. Normally, for a positive thing in the case of nominate, so you might nominate someone for an award, but it's to single out and for a reason. So I might designate someone to hand out the books, for example, at the beginning of a lesson. 22, if you're reserved, you are, well, it means the same, sorry, let me just scroll down so you can see clearly. It means the same thing as reticent, but both mean very similar to shy, or you lack confidence. If you're reticent to do something, you hesitate, you don't really want to do it. If you have reserved feelings or you feel reserved about doing something, you're unsure. So I think sort of a combination of being shy and lacking confidence really summarizes reserved and reticent quite nicely. 23, to diminish and to reduce, both mean to have less. I think reduce is the easier word there to know. So if you get diminished rewards or you get a diminished portion of food, for example, you're getting less than you would have had before. So both essentially mean less than or lesser in some way. 24, great word. Conceited and arrogant. I would say both mean sort of prideful. So to being too prideful or big-headed is another way of saying that. So again, conceited, fantastic word to include in any writing you're doing. Again, means prideful or arrogant. 25, a mirage could be a vision. So if you're seeing something before you, again, I think a mirage might most easily seen sort of in the desert where you are looking out and you potentially see what looks like water, and you think, oh, perhaps you finally come across an oasis or the ocean, and you get over the hill and it turns out to have been a mirage because of the heat on the sands, and this is something that's not real. So again, similar words might be an illusion, or even perhaps hologram would be similar. So mirage and vision, something that's not actually there. And finally, 26, to wane and to dwindle. So if, for example, things begin to wane or dwindle, so let's say I've got a supply of chocolate. If my supply of chocolate begins to dwindle, it starts to run out. So it means, again, both mean sort of decrease or have less of. On now to the opposites. You might also have heard of this as the antonym section. And in this case, it's slightly different to the synonyms because we're not just picking the word that means the opposite to a certain one. In fact, this is more a combination, I would say, of sort of the odd one out style of questions and antonyms, in that you are picking the word that does not match the meaning of the others. So in this case, if you look at the practice question, we have wide, broad, yawning, and vast, all meaning large open spaces or large and wide, whereas narrow, of course, like a narrow corridor is one without much space. It's one that's thin, or say lacking space. So obviously, in this case, B is the odd one out and is the antonym to all the other words. So just as a tip, obviously, when you're going through these questions, you find two words that have different meanings, you know at least one of those then is the odd one out, and you should home in on those. So, looking then, 27, we've got profligate, extravagant, wasteful, lavish, and frugal. In this case, if you are frugal, you don't waste things. You save. You look after your money. Every little bit helps. Whereas profligate, extravagant, wasteful, and lavish are over the top. You waste things. You might have a party. In the old days, the king or queen might show off how much they have by ordering far more food than anyone could eat, which is the opposite of being frugal, where you would save your money, save your things. And again, if we're doing an olden days example, perhaps a poor person who's had a bad year might be very frugal, trying to save every last bit of food they can to make sure they make it through the winter. 28. Retrieve, recover, reclaim, recoup all mean to gain back, whereas to lose something means to lose it, to not have it, to have something go missing. Where after something goes missing, you could then recover or reclaim it. 29. Courageous, valiant, undaunted, and audacious mean brave, whereas timid is the opposite of brave, it means shy. 30. To condemn, censure, blame, and accuse. You would do all these things to someone who you think has committed a crime, whereas if you absolve someone, you proclaim them innocent. So if let's say, oh, you've stolen this, no, I've been absolved, you sort of proved your innocence. 31, we have arrange, tidy, organise, and group. They all mean to put together, to put in order, whereas if you disturb something, you mess it up, you make it messy. So if you have a nice pile of cards that were disturbed, perhaps they've been knocked over onto the floor. 32, uniform the uniform is the odd one out because varied, irregular, random, and scattered all mean, funnily enough, the opposite of the 31, whereas a uniform means all in order. So if things are uniform, like a school uniform should be nice, neat, in order, whereas irregular, random, scattered is any order, all over the place, who knows. 33, we have weary, tired, fatigued, and exhausted. These all mean sleepy, not enough energy, whereas if you are energetic, you are full of energy. So you're ready for the day. 33, we have cautious, which is the opposite. No, sorry, we have cautious, aware, alert, and reckless. Sorry, and vigilant, which all mean on point, whereas reckless means you don't care. So if you're being very cautious, aware, vigilant, alert, you're doing things carefully, you're paying lots of attention. Whereas if you are reckless, you're doing things without thinking, without caring, making E reckless the odd one out. 35, we have mundane, tedious, unvaried, and prosaic, which are to say boring, standard, normal, whereas something is extraordinary, it's amazing, it's unusual, it stands out, something that's worth remembering. Let me just move this so we can get it all on the screen nicely. Little Billy doesn't want to be in the way. And finally, we have confused, bewildered, bemused, and nonplussed, which all mean the same as confused, unclear, not knowing something. Whereas if you are enlightened, you have knowledge, you have received enlightenment, you have received learning. So if you are a wise person, is one who has become enlightened. Whereas if you're confused, you're not really sure what's going on. Missing letters. For each of these, I've typed out the words in full. I think that's a slightly easier way of doing it, but let me read out the sentences. So for here, you simply have to fill in the sentence below. And just remember, of course, the way you'll have filled this in is by selecting letters from a drop-down box. So looking here, the practice example, we were soon to reach our destination. Obviously, then you would have to fill in ACH for the practice question. For 37, the report had a thorough conclusion at the end, so a good ending, which summarised things nicely. 38, the comedian gave a hilarious performance, a very funny performance. 39, we really had to be convinced to carry on going, obviously getting tired. 40, we all wanted to go on holiday in the summer, it's an excellent idea. 41, a majority of the group voted to stay. So obviously everyone's decided the same. 42, it was a tight match, but the stronger team eventually prevailed. That means they won. They came out on top. 43, in order to complete the challenge, we took on all the tasks, which is a good attitude to have. Last couple. 44, she always wanted to play in the orchestra as part of the band. Number 45, we had been here before, so everything was familiar, so they knew their way around. And 46, the inevitable happened, and it started to rain. That's a very English way of looking at things. It's inevitably going to rain at some point. And that, then, everyone, is the end of the paper. So thank you so much for this. Now, just would quickly take the moment to say congratulations, well done feeling through the examination. There will, of course, be paper 2 to look out for and a creative writing section that you'll have done as well. I'm sure the results will be winging their way to you soon, if not already. Of course, do just make sure, and this is in case you've seen this paper before you've posted your papers, that just before you do send anything to us, make sure you take a photograph of any results before you send them to us. But again, just to say thank you so much to everyone. We hope that was useful. And any questions, of course, don't hesitate to get in contact. Thank you everyone for your time. See you again.